Hi guys, it's Mr. Jackson with Blanket here. Going to go into part 2 of Everlost by Neal Shusterman with permission of Simon and Schuster. Today we'll be reading chapter 7. So, part 2, Mary, Queen of Snots. Chapter 7, The Forever Places. The Blanket's reading too. In the course of time and history, there are certain places that can never truly be lost. The living world, by its very nature, moves on, but some places are forever. The boy, now called Leaf, had the good fortune to stumble upon such a place many years before, a lush mountain forest that had once been the inspiration for poets. The place brimmed with such warm and good feeling. It inspired countless young men to propose marriage beneath its canopy, and countless young women to accept. The woods caused stiff-collared people to lose their inhibitions and dance among the leaves, wild with joy, even though they knew such dancing could have them condemned as witches. The forest was a fulcrum of life, and so, when it grew old and a beetle infestation routed bark and bough, the forest did not die. Instead, it crossed. Its life persisted, not in the living world, but in Everlost. Here, it would be eternally green, and on the verge of turning, just as the poets themselves would have liked to see it, had they not gotten where they were going. It can be said, then, that Everlost is heaven. Perhaps not for people, but for the places that deserve to share a forever. Such places are few and far between, these grand islands of eternity in the soupy, ever-changing world of the living. New York had its share of forever places. The greatest of these stood near Manhattan's southernmost tip, the two gray brothers to the green statue in the bay. The towers had found their heaven. They were part of Everlost now, held fast and held forever by the memories of a morning world, and by the dignity of the souls who got where they were going on that dark September day. The three kids approached the great twin towers in silence. What they saw as they neared them was not at all what they expected. There were children there, dozens of Afterlight kids playing on the grand marble plaza. Hopscotch, tag, hide and seek. Some were dressed like Allie in jeans and a t-shirt. Others were more formal. Still, more had clothes that seemed more from Leaf's time, all coarse and heavy. A few kids wore the gaudy bright colors of the 70s with big hair to match. They hadn't been noticed yet as they stood just beyond the edge of the plaza. Allie and Nick were almost afraid to step onto it, as if doing so would cross them onto yet another world. They stood there so long they sank to their ankles, even with their road shoes on. As Leaf's sense of awe did not have history nor context for this place, he had no problem moving forward. "Come on," he said. "What are you guys waiting for?" Nick and Allie looked at one another, then took that first step forward into the very solid marble of the plaza that no longer existed. After the first step, it became easier. It felt strange beneath their feet, so much solid ground. A team of girls playing double dutch jump rope noticed them first. "Hi," said an African-American girl in drab clothes and tight cornrowed hair. "You're green souls, aren't you?" All the time, she never stopped spinning her two ropes. Neither did the girl on the other end, who seemed entirely out of place there in the plaza, dressed in teddy bear pajamas. Other girls skillfully jumped in and out of the arc of their spinning ropes. One girl took enough time away from the game, though, to size them up. She wore a sparkling silver halter top and jeans that were so tight she looked like a sausage bursting out of its skin. She looked Allie over, clearly unimpressed by Allie's non-glittering wardrobe. Is that what they wear now? Yeah, pretty much. Then the girl in tight jeans looked at Leaf, examining his clothes as well. You're not a green soul. Says who? said Leaf, insulted. He's new to the city, Allie said. He might have crossed a long time ago, but he's still kind of like a green soul. A big red handball game came flying past, chased by a group of younger kids. The ball flew out of the plaza and into the street, crowded with the living. Hurry, one little boy yelled, before it sinks. Another boy raced out into traffic, grabbed the ball that was already beginning to sink into the pavement, and disappeared beneath a city bus and 2 taxis. He paid no mind, passing through the trunk of the last taxi, as he stood up with the ball and happily ran back to the plaza. You remember all those things your mama told you not to do, the girl said with cornrows, like not run out into traffic? Well, you can do them here. Who's in charge? Asked Nick. Mary, she said. You ought to go see her. She loves green souls. Then she added, we were all green souls once. Nick tapped Allie on the shoulder. Look, he said. By now, their presence had been noticed by most of the kids around the plaza. Many of the games had stopped, and the kids stared, not sure what to do. Out of the crowd, a girl stepped forward. She had long blonde hair that nearly touched the floor, wore a tie-dyed shirt and bell-bottoms so big the cuffs practically trailed behind her like a bridal train. A 60s hippie girl, if ever there was one. Don't tell me, Allie said. Your name is Summer, and you want to know if we're groovy. My name's Meadow, and I don't say groovy anymore because I got tired of people making fun of me. Do you have to insult everybody you meet? Nick whispered to Allie, then turned back to Meadow. I'm Nick, and this is Leaf. The rude one is Allie. I wasn't being rude, Allie insisted. I was being facetious. There's a difference. No sweat, said Meadow, which was almost as bad as groovy. Come on, I'll take you to Mary. Then she looked down. What are those on your feet? They looked down to the bundles of sticks extending from the soles of their shoes. Road shoes, said Nick. Kind of like snowshoes, so we don't sink, you know? Clever, said Meadow, but you won't need them anymore. They took off their road shoes and followed Meadow across the plaza toward Tower 1. Behind them, the rest of the kids returned to their games. They passed a fountain in the center of the plaza, and Meadow turned to them. Would you like to make a wish? Meadow asked. A closer look revealed the fountain to be full of coins beneath the shimmering water. Not really, Allie said. Mary says every green soul who comes here has to make a wish. Nick was already reaching into his pocket. I don't have a coin, Allie said. Meadow just smiled. Sure you do. And so, to prove it, Allie reached into her pockets and turned them out. See? What about your back pockets? Allie sighed. She checked her back pockets, knowing full well they were empty. She never used her back pockets. So it surprised her when she found the coin. Not even Johnny O's goons had found it, but then she had given them such a nasty look when they reached for her rear. They never actually checked her back pockets. Weird, Allie said, as she looked at the coin. Not really, Meadow gave her a hippie love fest smile. With all the money living people spend, everyone has at least one coin in their pocket when they cross. I once had a coin, Leaf said dejectedly, but it got stolen. Make a wish anyway, said Meadow. Mary says all wishes have a chance of coming true, except one. Nick threw his coin in, and then Allie threw hers. She made the wish every green soul made. The wish to be alive again. The one wish that didn't come true. Once their wishes had joined the others in the fountain, Meadow led them to Tower 1. Leaf was the ultimate tourist, staring heavenward to where the towers touched the sky. He bumped into other kids again and again, for he refused to look down. How do they stay up? Leaf asked. Wouldn't something that tall fall down? Allie was not a girl quickly given to tears, but she had found herself crying at least once a day since her arrival. Sometimes the revelation of just how drastically her existence had changed. Sometimes it was the revelation of just how drastically her existence had changed that would draw tears to her eyes. Other times it was the depth of how much she missed her family. Today, the tears were sudden and unexpected. What's the matter? Leaf asked. But there really was no way to explain to him. She wasn't even sure of the reason. Was she crying with joy that this place had left a permanent expression on the world, and that it was still here in Everlost? Or was just being here a reminder of how much was truly lost on that awful day when the towers crossed so violently from the world of the living? So many souls got where they were going that day when they shouldn't have been going at all. This is wrong, Allie said. Children shouldn't be playing here. It's like dancing on a grave. No, said Meadow. It's like putting flowers on a grave. Mary says the more happiness we bring back to this place, the more we honor it. So exactly who is this Mary? Nick asked. Meadow scrunched her lips, trying to think of how to explain. Mary's kind of like a shaman, a spiritual leader. Anyway, she knows lots of stuff, and so she pretty much runs things around here. The elevator stopped abruptly, and the door slid open to reveal that they had come all the way up to the observation level. They could tell because all of the coin-operated binocular machines lined up by the narrow windows that stretched from ceiling to floor. But everything else here had changed. It must have been remodeled into a makeshift orphanage. Just as in the square below, young afterlights from various time periods lingered, playing games or just sitting, waiting for something to happen to them. Allie still wasn't sure whether this was like some desecration of a hallowed ground or if having children here was somehow healing. As they walked around the floor to the north side, they passed a food court with a pizza place and a hot dog stand. The counters were closed. It looked like they hadn't served any food in a long time. But at each table sat kids, eating what appeared to be very, very small pieces of cake. That can't be, said Leaf. They're eating. How can that be? How can they be eating? Meadow smiled. Mary traded something for a birthday cake. She shared it with all the younger children. But we don't eat, said Leaf, confused. Just because we don't doesn't mean we can't when there's ghost food around. Ghost food? Said Leaf. There's ghost food? Nick looked at him and shook his head. You've been around for 100 years and you didn't know there was ghost food? Leaf looked like a kid who had missed the bus to Disneyland. No one ever told me. Seeing the smaller children eating the birthday cake reminded Allie how hungry she was. Just like her craving for sleep, she knew her hunger would eventually pass, but there was no telling when. If it had been she who had gotten the birthday cake, she would not have been so generous as to share it with anyone. Maybe Nick and Leaf, certainly, but certainly not a horde of little kids. You'll really dig Mary, said Meadow. Allie had to admit there was something comforting when Meadow's lingo matched her clothes. A makeshift wall had been built, blocking off the half of the floor, the north half of the floor. Mary's personal residence. A scrawny little kid with curly blonde hair stood at the door like a pint-sized guard. Some green souls to see Mary, Meadow announced. Green souls, said the curly-haired boy excitedly. I'm sure Miss Mary will want to see them right away. Okay then, ciao. Meadow waved a quick goodbye and sauntered away. She's funny, isn't she? Said the curly-headed boy. Meadow's always good for a laugh, he said. He put out his hand to shake. I'm Stradivarius, he said, but everyone just calls me Very. Come on, I'll introduce you to Mary. Miss Mary's private residence was full of mismatched furniture. Just like the kids here, everything seemed to come from different times and different places. It was all furniture that had crossed into Everlost, bright to the eyes and hard to the touch. Apparently, Mary was good at collecting things that had crossed over. When Mary saw them, she came gliding toward them, graceful on her feet. Allie wasn't one to judge a person by her wardrobe. After all, the snobs from her school judged her enough. But you couldn't help but notice Mary's dress, rich emerald velvet, with white lace cuffs and lace collar so tight it seemed about ready to strangle her. It looks like you must have died on the way to a wedding, Allie said. Nick didn't settle for rolling his eyes this time. Instead, he elbowed Allie in the ribs. No, Nick said, that was me. Mary never broke eye contact with Allie. It's impolite to comment on how someone crosses. Allie felt heat rise to her cheeks, surprised to know that she could still blush with embarrassment. But Mary took her hand warmingly. Don't feel bad, she said. I was just pointing out. You couldn't possibly expect to know. You're new to all this. She turned to Leaf and Nick. There are many things you'll be learning about your new lives, and until you do, you mustn't feel bad if you make mistakes. I'm not new, said Leaf, unable to meet her eyes. Well, you're new here, Mary said, with a warm smile, and so you have permission to feel just as new as you want to. Nick couldn't look away from Mary. He was captivated from the moment he saw her. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. She was also elegant, and her manner was as velvety smooth as her dress. Everyone introduced themselves, and when Nick took Mary's hand, she smiled at him. He was convinced that her smile was just for him. And although his rational mind told him otherwise, he refused to believe She smiled at everyone that way. You must be tired from your journey, Mary said, turning and leading them deeper into the apartment. I can't get tired, Allie said. Actually, said Mary, that's a common misconception. We do get tired, exhausted even. But it isn't sleep that refreshes us. We're refreshed by the company of others. Allie crossed her arms. Oh, please. No, said Very. It's true. We gain strength from each other. So what about Leaf? Allie asked. By now, Leaf had gravitated to the window and more interested in the view than anything else. He's been alone for 100 years, and he's got plenty of energy. Mary didn't miss a beat. Then he must have found a marvelous place full of love and life. She was, of course, right. Leaf's forest had been a sustaining place for him. Allie didn't know how to feel about this. Miss Mary? Allie hated know-it-alls. But in this case, Mary actually did appear to know it all. We've turned the top floors of this tower into living quarters, but most of them are still empty. You're free to choose where you'd like to stay. Who said we're staying? Said Allie. Dick nudged her with his elbow. Harder this time. Allie, he said between his teeth. It's impolite to turn down an invitation in this world, or in any way, or in any world for that matter. But Mary was offended. She didn't show it. But if Mary was offended, she didn't show it. Consider this a rest stop, if you like, Mary said cordially. A way station on to wherever it is you're going. We weren't going anywhere, Nick said with a smile, and he was trying to sound charming, but instead wound up sounding heavily sedated. Allie was fully prepared to smack that starry gaze clear out of Nick's eyes. But she restrained herself. We were going home, she reminded him. Of course, that would be your first instinct, Mary said with supreme patience. You couldn't be expected to know the consequences. Please stop talking to me like I'm ignorant, said Allie. You are ignorant, said Very. All green souls are. It infuriated Allie that this was true. She, Nick, and Leaf were at a disadvantage. Very went over to the cabinet and pulled out 3 books. Here, a crash course in Everlost. He handed them each a book. You have to forget what you know about the living world and get used to the way things are here. What if I don't want to forget the living world? Allie said. Mary smiled politely. I understand how you feel, she said. Letting go is hard. Tips for taps, Nick said, reading from the cover of the book by Mary Hightower. That's you. Mary smiled. We all must do something with our afterlife, she said. I write. Allie looked at her own volume, impressed in spite of herself. She leafed through the book, 300 pages at least, and each page handwritten and painstakingly perfect penmanship. Well, thought Allie, if we came here looking to find answers, and now we're in the company of the authority of Everlost. What could be better? Yet for some reason, Allie didn't feel all that comforted. In her book, Death Be Not Dull, Mary Hightower writes, Afterlight green souls are precious. They are fragile. There are so many hazards for them here in Everlost, for they are like babies with no knowledge of the way things are. And, like babies, they must be nurtured and guided with a loving but firm hand. Their eternity rests on how well they adjust to life in Everlost. A poorly adjusted afterlife can warp and distort in horrifying ways. Therefore, green souls must be treated with patience, kindness, and charity. It's the only way to properly mold them. So that was chapter 7 of Everlost. So let's ask a few questions. First, what was the setting of this chapter? And remember, a setting is where a story takes place. Next, about the setting, Nick and Allie are in awe of the Twin Towers when they see them. Why? And then Leaf is also in awe of the Twin Towers when he sees them, but for a very different reason. Why is Leaf in awe of the Twin Towers? Next, why does Leaf have a different reaction than Nick and Allie do? Finally, about Mary Hightower. Mary Hightower gets to meet Nick, Allie, and Leaf. And so I want to ask you, does Nick like Mary Hightower? And then I want to also ask, does Allie like Mary Hightower? So feel free to discuss these. Let me know what you think about these questions or anything else. I hope you guys are all safe. I miss you. Take care of yourselves and your family. And have a really safe night.